Behind the tattoos and the shadows lies a world where tradition meets terror. Welcome to the untold story of the Yakuza, the largest mafia in the world, with roots stretching back to 17th century Japan. From protecting the oppressed to ruling global crime, this is an empire built on loyalty, fear, and blood. The Yakuza exercise vast control over courts and police forces operating in the shadows of their homeland. They eliminate bankers who dare to demand loan repayments, all while portraying themselves as staunch defenders of traditional values. In their native Japan, they remain untouchable, a force no one dares to confront. The origins of the Yakuza date back to the 17th century, during the Tokugawa shogunate's rule. This period was marked by Japan's near-total isolation from the outside world. Foreign trade ceased, external influences were shunned, and warfare became a relic of the past. While this era of peace pleased many, it spelled disaster for the samurai class. Stripped of their purpose, unemployment among samurai surged to staggering numbers, exceeding 500,000. Without battles to fight or foes to conquer, frustration consumed these former warriors. Skilled only in combat and killing, they grew restless. Driven by boredom, armed bands began terrorizing local villagers. Merchants, known as makiyako, emerged as protectors of these oppressed communities. Joining them were owners of entertainment houses, where gambling became a favored pastime among patrons. What began as altruistic protection evolved over the next century into a lucrative enterprise. The once noble defenders started extorting money from the very people they claimed to shield. Payments for protection became mandatory, and the booming profits from gambling turned the makiyako into some of the wealthiest and most influential individuals in Japan. The allure of quick riches and life outside the confines of the law attracted a growing number of recruits. Initially, the Yakuza drew societal outcasts, individuals struggling to adapt to the rapidly changing landscape of 19th century Japan. Over time, they also welcomed members of the lower social classes, who saw the organization as their only means of survival in an unforgiving world. A popular card game known as Oichokabu played a pivotal role in shaping the identity of this emerging syndicate. In the game, the worst possible hand consisted of 3 cards, 8, 9, and 3, pronounced as Yakuza in one Japanese dialect. This term would later become synonymous with what is now the world's most notorious criminal organization. The Yakuza, a sprawling criminal organization with more than 90,000 members, extends its reach across the globe. They maintain strategic alliances with other powerful groups, such as the Italian Mafia and Chinese triads. Yet, despite their infamy and the countless stories surrounding them, the truth about the Yakuza often blurs with myth. Who are these modern-day gangsters? How can they be identified? What do they actually do? The answers to these questions are far more complex than they appear at first glance. Historically, tattoos in Japan were used to brand individuals convicted of crimes, marking them as outcasts. Within the Yakuza, however, tattoos have evolved into powerful symbols of affiliation and status. The larger and more intricate the tattoo, the higher the rank of the person bearing it. Yakuza members often cover up to 70% of their bodies in tattoos, a painful process that can require up to 100 sessions to complete. Despite the cultural significance of these elaborate designs, not all members choose to endure this grueling ritual. It is not a mandatory practice within the organization. Another enduring legend involves the act of severing one's little finger as a gesture of apology for violating the Yakuza's strict codes. While this ritual, known as Yubitsum, was widely practiced decades ago and often enforced by gang leaders, modern Yakuza have largely abandoned this brutal custom. The reasoning is pragmatic. A hand missing a finger is less effective when handling weapons, compromising the practicality that is so highly valued in the criminal underworld. The role of women in the Yakuza is similarly shrouded in tradition and stereotype. As a predominantly male-dominated organization, the Yakuza views women as inherently weaker and unfit for the demands of their world. The belief persists that women lack the ability to fight fiercely or keep critical secrets, a cornerstone of the Yakuza's operations. It is also assumed that under police interrogation, a woman would be quick to betray her male counterparts, jeopardizing the entire organization. Women may occasionally enter the inner circle, but only under exceptional circumstances, such as being the wife of a high-ranking boss. Even then, their roles are limited. They are not permitted to participate in decision-making or engage in their husband's business dealings. The Yakuza is filled with wives, daughters, and mistresses of its leaders, but they are never treated as equals to their male counterparts. When women break the rules, their punishments are notably less severe, reflecting a double standard that underscores their subordinate status within the organization. The Yakuza, Japan's infamous organized crime syndicate, consists of several major factions, with the three largest, Yamaguchi-gumi, Sumiyoshi-kai, and Inagawa-kai, boasting a combined membership of over 50,000 individuals within Japan alone. These groups are not merely criminal enterprises, they are deeply rooted in a particular brand of ultra-conservative ideology. Their members often portray themselves as guardians of Japan's cultural heritage, protectors of its traditional values, and even defenders of the nation itself. This carefully cultivated image resonates with a significant portion of the Japanese public. Many people speak of the Yakuza in almost reverent terms, seemingly unperturbed by the harsh realities of their operations. Even the grim statistic that street wars between the Yakuza and rival factions claim hundreds of innocent lives each year does little to tarnish this perception. The Yakuza's profound influence over Japan's legal and law enforcement systems ensures that the darker aspects of their activities are rarely exposed. Details about their daily operations or the violent conflicts that occasionally erupt within Japan's urban centers seldom reach the public. Both the police and the media are reluctant to shed light on these incidents, allowing the Yakuza to maintain their secrecy. One such conflict occurred during the late 1970s when the Yamaguchi-gumi clashed with a rival group, the Matsuda-gumi. The feud began in 1975 following the death of Matsuda-gumi's leader, for which Yamaguchi-gumi was widely blamed. Over the next 3 years, brutal violence unfolded as foot soldiers from both factions fought openly, with assassinations and retaliations taking place in broad daylight. Leading the Yamaguchi-gumi at the time was Kazuo Taoka, one of the most influential figures in the syndicate's history. Known for his cunning and ruthlessness, Taoka commanded an army of over 12,000 loyal followers, who guarded him with unwavering devotion. Taoka's reputation extended beyond the criminal underworld. He was widely recognized across Japan as the godfather of all godfathers, a testament to his unparalleled power and influence. Within his inner circle, he earned the nickname the Bear, a reference to his ferocity in combat. Taoka was infamous for physically maiming his enemies during direct confrontations, often using his bare hands to tear at their faces. In July 1978, another chapter of bloodshed unfolded as an ambitious assassination attempt targeted Taoka. During a night out at a nightclub featuring a pole dancing performance, 25-year-old Kiyoshi Narumi approached him with a concealed firearm. Without hesitation, Narumi fired a shot to the back of Taoka's head. The bullet exited through his mouth, leaving the Yakuza leader severely wounded but miraculously alive. He was rushed to the hospital under heavy police escort, where he not only survived the attack but emerged with his reputation further solidified. The incident earned him a new moniker among his followers, the Immortal. Narumi, however, met a far more gruesome fate. Within weeks of the botched assassination, his lifeless body was discovered in a forest near Kobe. His corpse displayed signs of extreme brutality, his face was mutilated, his abdomen was slit open, and his remains were strung up in the trees. In addition, rumors circulated that the male members of Narumi's family, numbering around 20 individuals, had vanished without a trace. It was said that they were subjected to unspeakable torture before their deaths, with tongues and index fingers severed as part of the punishment. Whispers in the underworld suggested that Taoka himself carried out the final act of vengeance, a demonstration of his unwavering authority and ruthlessness. The Yakuza, much like other organized crime syndicates operating outside the bounds of the law, derives its immense wealth from a variety of illicit ventures. At the core of their financial empire lies gambling, a cornerstone of their operations that has consistently generated massive profits. Even a single, modest gambling den hidden in a rundown building can bring in as much as 10 million yen, roughly $100,000, within a single month. On the other end of the spectrum are exclusive, high-stakes clubs where a single bet in a card game can exceed $1,000. The daily turnover in such elite establishments can skyrocket to a staggering $1 million. These opulent venues attract a clientele of wealthy businessmen and influential politicians, many of whom gamble away not only their fortunes but their entire livelihoods. When these individuals find themselves bankrupt, they inevitably turn to the only lenders willing to extend a lifeline, the Yakuza. Offering loans with exorbitant interest rates, these tattooed bankers prey on the desperate, who have no choice but to accept their terms. The consequences of defaulting on such loans are universally understood, and no one dares to test the limits of the Yakuza's patience when it comes to unpaid debts. Prostitution has also proven to be a highly lucrative enterprise for the Yakuza. In the 1950s, Japan was home to nearly 2,000 so-called forbidden districts, which housed over 40,000 brothels. However, the legal landscape shifted in 1958 when prostitution was officially outlawed. Rather than diminishing, the industry adapted and thrived. Brothels rebranded themselves as massage parlors, while prostitutes took on the title of hostesses. These changes in terminology allowed the trade to persist under a veil of legitimacy, funneling all profits directly into the hands of the Yakuza. Wherever gambling and sex thrive, the presence of drugs often follows. However, Japan presents a unique case. The local population exhibits a strong cultural aversion to drug use, making the domestic market for narcotics relatively small. At first glance, this would seem to limit the Yakuza's ability to profit from drug trafficking. In reality, the opposite is true. Recognizing the lack of demand at home, the Yakuza has turned its focus outward, establishing itself as a key player in the international drug trade. By acting as intermediaries, they facilitate the movement of illicit substances between Asia and the United States, turning this export business into a highly profitable venture. Like many criminal organizations worldwide, the Yakuza eventually set their sights on legitimate business ventures. By the late 20th century, they began heavily investing in land development projects, focusing on constructing hotels and golf courses. Driven by their staunchly right-wing ideologies, these establishments often catered almost exclusively to Japanese patrons. The Yakuza's ambitions, however, extended far beyond their homeland. Similar investments were made in countries like Australia and the United States, where these facilities became particularly popular among Japanese tourists seeking familiar comforts abroad. Real estate trading also emerged as a lucrative pursuit for the Yakuza. However, after years of significant profits, the group encountered financial turbulence during the economic crisis of the late 1990s. Facing potential bankruptcy, they turned to Japan's banking institutions for loans. At first, these banks were eager to extend credit, but over time, the Yakuza's debts became an insurmountable burden on the financial sector. When the banks began pressing for repayments, they encountered a harsh reality: the Yakuza does not respond well to pressure. In a chilling demonstration of their power, the Yakuza introduced the bankers to their own set of rules. It began with the assassination of the Hanwha Bank president in 1993, who was the first to demand repayment from the crime syndicate. His murder was followed by the killing of Sumitomo Bank's president under similar circumstances. Over time, a total of 7 high-ranking bank officials involved in attempts to recover debts from the Yakuza met violent ends. The last victim was Tadao Hamna, a former director of the Bank of Japan and, at the time of his death, the newly appointed president of Nippon Credit Bank. Hamna was killed while reviewing records of delinquent loans in a hotel room. Witnesses reported hearing sounds of a struggle and shouting from Hamna's room. Yet, in a perplexing turn of events, the police ruled his death a suicide, claiming he shot himself. To further complicate matters, Hamna's body disappeared before an autopsy could be conducted. Mere weeks later, all outstanding Yakuza debts were mysteriously written off, allowing the syndicate to resume their business activities without further hindrance. The Yakuza's foray into legitimate enterprises proved so successful that their profits from these ventures began rivaling, and in some cases surpassing, their earnings from illegal activities. However, this shift brought little comfort to Japanese law enforcement. Much of the revenue generated from these legitimate businesses was funneled back into illegal operations, including the purchase of illicit firearms, trafficking of narcotics, and the construction of increasingly extravagant pleasure houses. For many, stepping foot in Japan feels like entering a realm subtly yet profoundly influenced by the Yakuza. Their presence permeates countless aspects of daily life, creating an unspoken understanding among locals and visitors alike. The Yakuza is not to be provoked. In Japan, the phrase remaining silent carries a weighty implication. It often means ensuring peace of mind, and sometimes survival. To an outsider, the Yakuza may appear as an inseparable element of Japanese folklore, a dark yet enduring aspect of the nation's cultural fabric. In the land of the rising sun, ignoring their presence might be the wisest decision one could make.